Today on the podcast, we are talking all things back to school AI in education. This is an area that Connor and I are both really excited about. Connor, obviously, with deep ties at NYU Stern. And of course, myself formerly was a university instructor for marketing. So both of us are we really love this whole learning. We're both dads. And so getting back to school and really using AI, making sure that either you're leveraging it or making sure your kids or your students are leveraging it, I think is incredibly important. So we want to talk about a bunch of different strategies, tools, things we're using. And I guess, Connor, kicking it over to you, what are some of your favorite back to school? What are some of the things that people are maybe not doing that they should be when it comes to using AI and really getting kicked off with it?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think all parents are trying to solve this. And essentially, I obviously do, a fair amount at NYU, but first of all, I want to let everybody, excuse me, take a deep breath and say, nobody has figured this out. If you think your school isn't doing anything, guys, that's pretty much every school. Okay, so don't crush your teachers, don't crush the administration. Just know that this is a very, very hard problem to solve. We've been in this state for a couple of years. Still, nobody knows. Here's the thing. So, my son Finn, who's 16, a junior in high school, he and I have done a lot of work together on this. He and I went out to Nepal, as I might have talked about before, to go teach at schools out there, to teach AI in schools. But more importantly, we're trying to think about how do we reimagine education altogether? Right. And now, by the way, we can say that, but that's a very hard thing to pull off, like a system that's been in place for probably 3,000 years. Like, how do we just switch? So the first thing I want to say, Jaeden, is that everybody has to take this on for themselves. Obviously, you can push at your school and everything else. Understand what the problem is. The problem is essentially that they've been doing this the same way for millennia. It's very hard to just kind of turn it on and off. Like, you'll have professors or teachers, if you have young kids. Jaden's kids are a little younger than mine. I have 2 high schoolers. The idea here is that teachers have been voted teacher of the year and everything else for doing things the exact same way. And the problem is, no longer can you just assign a take-home test, or a take-home essay or something like that. There are no good AI detectors. Please do not trust them. So what do we do? What do we do as parents? The first thing I think we need to do is ask your school, well, what is the approach? Is there sort of one unified approach, or is there not? Because if it's left up to each individual teacher, you have to understand that each individual teacher sees AI very differently. That's number one. Number two is, sometimes we sort of like get irritated because we think, teachers are making the students come in and write things on paper and like do in-class essays and things like that. Guys, I'm not sure I totally disagree with that approach. Okay. Like, we have to really figure out how students can, remain good critical thinkers. And the answer is not more AI. Jaeden and I are both extremely bullish on AI, but there has to be a moment where students are learning critical thinking skills. Now, obviously, I don't have to go into the big problem, which is students are very much incented to get good grades. And they're not really incented to learn critical thinking skills. They're incented to get good grades. So how do we approach that? So number one, figure out what your school is doing. What's their unified approach? How are they talking about what tools are teachers using in class? And make sure there is a mix. Make sure that the students are just coming home and writing using AI. They're probably not. But how are they using AI? Where will they have the opportunity to use AI to really expand their thinking? And I think that's really, really critical. And if you don't know where your school is on this, just ask, because the more people that ask, the more that's going to push teachers and the administration to start figuring this out. So Jaeden, you are an AI master and guru, as we all know. You have some of the biggest podcasts, maybe the biggest AI podcast actually on the planet. When you think about your kids who are a little on the younger side, obviously, and we know, your wife can create storybooks and songs and everything else. You guys are an incredibly creative family. When you think about AI in the school system, and are you thinking about this more as, okay, amazing learning tool, best learning tool ever, which it is? Or are you thinking, holy cow, this has the potential to really disrupt critical thinking and we can't have that happen? As a dad and as an AI guru, where do you stand on all this?
I think that it's basically the greatest learning tool we possibly can have. Basically, you can remove all of the time it takes to get to information. And maybe some people think it's bad. And I'm sure there's some sort of argument out there that it's no, the journey of retrieving the information helps you retain it better. So maybe there's an argument there. I don't know. In my opinion, I'm just trying to be efficient. I'm trying to get my information, use it to help me make a decision and get out. That's basically what I think my workflow is and for a lot of people, that's the framework they use for decision making. And I think For a long time, there's kind of been this disconnect, I feel like, where the way you learn things in an educational setting might not be the same way you learn or apply things in the real world. And I think finally with AI, we're able to merge these if we do it correctly. So personally, I think it's an incredible tool. There's so many great use cases, but I'll give one that I feel like illustrates how to use this tool or how to use AI as a tool. And I'm not saying this specific use case is like anything super important of itself, other than it's basically how I would use this. And it actually partially comes from how I personally use AI when I'm trying to learn about a new topic. I also will share an example that I really love, Connor. I know you have shared, and Finn, your son, actually came up with, which shout out to Finn. We'll definitely have him on the podcast sometime in the future, doing some really cool stuff with AI in education. But basically, my approach that I look at when I use AI is I love the voice, and I think children and students, I love the voice element of ChatGPT or any of these AI models where you essentially can talk to it as if it's a tutor or as if it's a professor. Something about typing isn't bad when you ask it questions. You treat it like Google. I think that's fine. But I think that you could get a lot more out of it if you act like it's a person, like a tutor, a professor, and you're getting information. So Finn, your son, had a great use case where I believe, I'm sure I'm misquoting this slightly, but he wanted to learn about what it was like at a certain time period. So he said, I'm an immigrant coming to New York, walking off the boat in 60 or something. What does it look like? What are the sights and smells? And basically had this conversation where he walked through the streets and he looked at the signs and he was trying to get a job in a textiles factory. And I think that is such an incredible idea because obviously all of the information is on the internet about pictures of that time period and a lot of things like that. But being able to really immerse yourself in it and get a lot of verbal feedback and concepts. And of course, we know these AI tools will evolve in the future. It's probably going to be like a 3D VR video where you could go and do that whole same experience. When it comes to using AI for myself, this is really similar to my approach where I'm trying to learn about, some new, accounting mechanism or marketing strategy or, funding, concept for a company. I'm basically going to be talking with ChatGPT, breaking down, giving it as much data as I can about the topic or my company or my situation and getting it to basically act as a tutor or a coach and help walk me through this. I think for students and for teachers, like this is just an incredible resource that, like, if you think about it, and I'd be curious your take on this, Connor, but like, I feel like this is definitely helping people that never had as many resources before, right? Maybe people who come from lower income families, their parents can't afford expensive tutors to help their children. All of a sudden, I feel like this unlocks a lot for a lot more people.
Yeah, I mean, no question, right? So one of the reasons we went out to Nepal to do this is that they can't afford tutors and things like that out there. They can barely, get the teachers in the buildings. So just from, we talk about the big AI divide, and I think that's going to come for sure. But I think this is an amazing leveler. Like you're going to have the most amazing tutor that's tailored completely to you. And it's essentially free for everybody as long as you have internet access. And I don't want to presume that everybody does. I know it seems so, if you're listening to a podcast, you're like, what are you talking about? Like there's a lot of people that don't have access. So, but yeah, that's number one. But Jaeden, I love sort of, how you're thinking about it also, because I also agree that it's the best tool ever. Now, are there realistic challenges in place about how this could just do your homework for you? Absolutely. No question. So there have to be guardrails in place. We can't expect kids to put their own guardrails in place. We just can't. I mean, because they're incentivized by good grades. However, I would say that there's a lot more creative ways than what we're doing right now. So one of my favorites is like the student learning challenge, right? And I know that's a super generic way to say it, but the idea is instead of saying, hey, kids, I'm going to teach you this thing and then come back in and then we're going to test you on that. What if instead we said, hey, listen, I want you all to go home, use AI in any way you want. And here's this thing about, how volcanoes work or something like that. Come back in and find the single most creative way and sticky way that you can teach the rest of the class this. And the winner, gets an A or something like that. Because I'm telling you, and Jaeden, you know this as well, from the example you just said, AI is so blindingly creative that it can come up with songs and poems and stories and things that you can, or assign, all the parts of the, if you sort of like imagine sort of a crosshatch of a volcano or something like the cross section of a volcano, a kind of a certain way by which you could remember all these parts, either again through a song or a cinematic, visual or something like that. It's absolutely incredible. And I just feel like, first of all, if you ever want to learn something You have to teach it, as we know. But have your kids or students or whatever it is think about ways, because first of all, it'll help them learn. Second of all, like that exact topic, but second of all, it'll show them, oh my gosh, this really unlocks a new way of learning. So then they go into tests actually knowing something. And I hate to sound corny on this, but it can make learning actually really fun, because there's parts of the, biology and things like that, which must be interesting, but maybe you're just not interested in them. But when you present them in a certain way, it can feel like you're watching a movie or something like that. So I love to put the learning and the teaching back on students. Let them use AI. I think they're going to learn in whole new ways.
Yep, 100%. And so I think basically this is kind of the approach that is what a lot of some people are embracing, but some people are resisting. And I think at the end of the day, it shouldn't be like, well, how are we going to stop kids from using AI in education? I think the conversation should be like, how do we get kids to use AI in education and use it responsibly and for good ways that are making sure that they're learning? But I think we have to shift our mindset from like, how do we stop it from being used to cheat, and you say, how do we enable it to be used to learn, right? And I think that mindset shift makes a huge difference, because it's inevitable. There is no stopping it. And it is an incredible resource if we use it correctly. So that's basically what my framing is on this. As we wrap up, I would definitely just want to share with everyone, like if you yourself are looking for ways to use AI to kind of create an entire new mindset for yourself, understand how to use AI, how to use it inside of your work or your business, I would definitely recommend Conor's AI mindset course. This is something that thousands, tens of thousands of people have tried and given absolutely incredible rave reviews on. This is basically, it's generative AI for professionals. It's a strategic framework that basically gives you an edge inside of your organization. Something that I've seen a lot of people use. Conor didn't put me up to this. I'm just sharing this because genuinely, when you talk about AI in education, I'd feel bad if I didn't share this resource. But there's definitely a ton of companies that basically, once one person inside of the organization will take this course, they will make it mandatory for everybody to take it, because it basically helps upskill your entire organization on how to use AI. And so anyways, I would highly recommend checking this out. If your company hasn't already purchased a license for your entire organization, I would definitely recommend going and checking it out. There's a link in the description. It's ai-mindset.ai. /courses. So anyways, thanks so much everyone for tuning into the podcast today. One last thing I wanted to mention, if you've ever thought, gee, should I write a review for this podcast? Next episode, Conor and I are actually going to be reading reviews that people have left on the podcast. I will be reading them. So if you have some new product that the whole world needs to hear about, or if you have some new concept or idea, make sure to go drop a comment on the show, leave a review, and we'll be reading reviews. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you guys all in the next episode.
Cool.